What's going on, leaders? Thank you for watching this episode of Leadership Lockdown. I'm Aaron Bolton. I'm really excited about our guest today, Shane Scott. We had a great conversation, and I really hope you enjoy it. If you could, give me a thumbs up, maybe subscribe, click that notifications bell if you want to get notified. And if you're watching this on LinkedIn, maybe give me a follow. That'd be pretty cool. All right, let's go. People want to see this. This is the content that people want to see.
Now, what kind of coffee beans did you use today?
These are specially roasted Arabica beans from Dunkin' Donuts original blend. So
that's my go-to day-to-day coffee. It's good stuff, nice and smooth.
It really is. I mean, I don't want to brag, but as someone who used to work for the Starbucks,
yes,
I do give it a thumbs up. All right, ready to get rolling?
Yes, sir.
All right. Hello, leaders. This is Aaron Bolton, and welcome to the Leadership Lockdown. I have a very special guest today. Every guest is special, but this one more so than all of them. This is a friend of mine and also a preacher at the church I attend. His name is Mr. Shane Scott. Shane, how you doing, sir?
Doing good, Aaron. Great to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. So there was, everyone that I've had on so far, and even going into the concept, the idea of leadership lockdown, kind of building it out, I always had the mindset of like business focused leadership. And then in, so many of the podcasts, and this is something that I often bring up in different workshops that I put on is, leadership is leadership. You cannot separate business leadership from your personal leadership. And like I'm a focused leader at work, and then at home I'm a slob. It won't mold, right? And so I was only focused on business leaders, and then kept thinking about that. I was like, well, there's other aspects to leadership, and I wanted to have you on because you bring a very, well, in this day, very unique focus of leadership, which would be like a spiritual leadership. Right. And I know some people, and I've kind of brought this up to a couple people, and they're like, oh, is he going to do a sermon? And like, no, can you please?
That's the last thing anybody wants, believe me.
Well, can you please confirm that preachers do other things than just sermons all the time?
That's right. Yes, right. That's exactly right.
So no, but it would be getting your insight on everything that's happening right now. I mean, and I'm not sure if I'm stealing this from a Facebook post that you posted or an email that went out, but and I'm going to butcher it. Everyone feel free to Google check this, but there's like been a ridiculous spike in Google searches on how to pray, in the past month or two. Is that something, have you heard of that, or have you seen that?
I haven't heard of that, but it doesn't surprise me at all based on what I've seen from my Facebook friends, which is a pretty diverse lot. But I think that a lot of the time at home that a lot of us have been forced into has certainly opened the door for people to pursue their own personal, belief system, whatever it is. I mean, I've seen things about meditation. So I don't think it even has to necessarily be a particularly religious thing, but I think a lot of people are diving into things they can do for their inner life, having a richer inner life during this time of the lockdown.
Absolutely. So you just mentioned something that I wanted to actually touch on was your diverse group of friends. And you've talked about this before, and I've always found this to be unique and interesting, but I think the right way to go about having friends. And you talk openly, talk about having friends of every type of, religion and background and, creed, or, well, not bad creeds, obviously,
right.
But, any type of, religious belief. And those are your friends, and you talk to them as friends. And I think a lot of times I don't want to say a lot of times, but sometimes people might think of a spiritual leader or, or a shepherd, or, kind of only staying within that lane. And I've heard people criticized before, not you, but I've just heard the criticism of, those are that they have a completely different belief. We have to have,
Right.
we have to have a focus on the right way, So, So what is if you could explain talk a little about that, what's your mindset on that?
Yeah. So for me, a pivotal moment came way back in the mid '90s when I was preaching as a young preacher in the second congregation that I worked with. And one of our members was a young man who had done some theater in high school. And once he got out of college, he was interested in trying to do a little community theater thing. So he wanted to put together a little production of Little Abner. And it has a character, it's set in Dogpatch, USA, which is like a hillbilly town. And there's a preacher named Marion Sam. He's the preacher who marries everybody. And so he was looking around for a hillbilly preacher, somebody to play a hillbilly preacher. And, I grew up in Kentucky, and I'm a preacher, so I was kind of like typecast, right?
Right.
So I remember then.
You got to watch out for that, Shane. If you
That's
keep
right.
typecast, you're not going to have yourself open to other roles.
That's right. So, well, there are no small parts, only small actors.
That's right.
I've
That's
learned.
right.
But anyway, so one night after one of the productions, a bunch of us on the cast wanted to, get together and play some games and just kind of hang out. And I had a parsonage, a preacher's house, and so I invited everybody to come. And as it happened, of the people who were there that night, there were several of us from the same church who were in the production. But as it turned out, nobody else from the church where I preached was there. It was all people whose religious backgrounds I really knew nothing about. And I remember consciously thinking, I feel weird right now because I'm not with anybody from church. And when you're a minister, a lot of the time, not only is your work associates people at church, but all of your closest social connections, really almost all of your social connections are people from church. And I remember thinking, how am I as a preacher, supposed to help my congregation learn how to deal with people who don't share their same faith when I never, ever have to do that myself? So then I decided I need to take up some kind of hobby, some activity that could put me in contact with a more diverse set of friends. And the hobby I chose was a very weird niche hobby, which is singing barbershop music. But through the course of that, I have developed many rich friendships, as you said, people from just about all faiths and many people from no faith at all. And it's really enriched my life. And I think, ironically, social media, which in theory could put us in contact with the world, has instead created more isolation. I think so many people in social media are only friends with people who think just like them, and they only read things from people who believe just like them. And that's why, in part, we're such a polarized society right now. That's why we can't even agree on something like, this virus, for example, right. Which I think is just so destructive to just basic communication as a culture. So I have really been blessed by my friendships with people who have very different beliefs from me, because it has humanized them. When you don't have relationships with people who don't believe the same as you, it's easy to dehumanize, to caricature them, Right. But when you have relationships with people, then you can't just so easily dehumanize them, and then you don't so easily hate them or do things that are unkind to them. So yeah, it's been an intentional thing on my part. Sometimes it's kind of funny because, like, of my Facebook friends, about half of them are people I know like through church type work, and about half are people I know through my barbershop stuff. And sometimes the worlds collide. Right. But that's okay. That's part of it.
Oh, I can imagine somebody from church posting something, biblical, some biblical idea or concept. And then maybe you comment on it, maybe you repost it or something. And then somebody from your side, some of your friends,
right.
where they're used to maybe having that conversation with you, they go in on this post, but now they're really having a conversation with someone else that they're like, what's going on here? You can see
Yeah,
that.
no, you are exactly right, Aaron. And I do have to say, I mean, I think we should be harder on the people we agree with than we disagree with. So I'm probably more critical of the people that I share more in common with religiously. But I do get frustrated that sometimes some of my friends who have the same sort of beliefs can sometimes be the most unkind in those exchanges.
Mm.
And it's part of it is because they maybe are not used to being in that environment where there's give and take with, people that you're friends with that you don't feel the same about certain issues. And so they just kind of, barge right in. But that's good because, I mean, all of us can have a tendency to do that. It just depends on the topic. So, but it is a little bit frustrating, but even then that's good because, part of the diversity is not just in beliefs, but in attitudes and mindsets, even with people you agree with. So all of that really is good to kind of help learn how to just deal with people.
Well, I think that's absolutely great. Staying on social media, having it's almost a forced opportunity, really. It's called,
Hmm.
being in an echo chamber, right? So
Hmm.
whatever
Yes.
algorithms they have, they keep sending you the same thing you're used to looking at, that you enjoy looking at. So you just stay within that bubble. And, on Facebook, you just keep reading the same thing that, the people closest to you, your friends, are saying. So I think, yeah, having that interaction, maybe you should start setting that up a little bit more, just to cross the aisle a little bit. Just repost somebody's post and say, hey, Jacob, what do you think about this one?
Now that would be if you had the technical ability to do this, to somehow be able to break into somebody's account and to deliberately create algorithms that are hilariously the opposite of everything they
Of
think.
everything.
Now that would be pretty funny right there.
That'd be horrible. A bunch of PETA activists just getting
That's
nothing
right.
but like stuff from the beef industry. Like,
That's right. Right. Exactly.
why?
Exactly.
And next thing you know, their mind has changed. They're like, you know what? I
That's
am going to
right.
eat me a burger. Oh, that's
Why
right.
do I keep clicking this account to order 50 pounds of beef? I don't
I
understand
Now I need it. So
it.
so you're a preacher, but you used to also you were a professor at Florida College, and you mentioned also in a barbershop quartet, which is, are you
Mhm.
still touring with the barbershop quartet? Are you still doing some
No, we
performances?
we used to travel around, the little barbershop subculture. Um, I don't know if you've
So
ever seen
wild
any of
group.
those.
So wild.
Yes, it is. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those movies like A Mighty Wind or Best in Show or Waiting for Guffman, but these are hilarious movies that they pick on little subcultures. Like one's about community theater, one's about folk music. Barbershop could easily be one of those movies. So it has its own little dynamics and everything, but it's very much a weekend hobby kind of thing. So my quartet, when I lived up in Nashville, when all of us were living in Nashville, we would do about 10 or 12 little performances a year. We did get to do some really cool things. We were invited overseas. We went to England and to Finland and Australia and New Zealand. But once I moved away from Nashville and another one of the singers moved away up to New York, it was just hard to coordinate everything. Every now and then we are asked to go sing somewhere. We theoretically have a performance in the DC area in November, but because of the virus, I don't know how all of that is gonna pan out. But yeah, but it was a fun hobby for sure. It's kind of like having a chance to go on the weekend and in a very small microscopic way experience like what big time performers do. We got to perform once at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, which is sort of like the mother church of country music, and we got to perform at Carnegie Hall once. And
Oh,
so to
wow.
just say that you got to do that
Right.
as an amateur singer is a really neat experience to have
Well, just
had.
to say that you went to Carnegie Hall,
That's
let's just say that
right.
you were
That's
inside
right.
that's really cool that you
I
were on
snuck
stage.
in.
I,
I snuck in the fire door and got
I
in.
put
Yeah.
on a vest. Everyone thought I was an
That's
usher.
right.
Oh, that's funny.
So
I'm sure you get, this is just a suggestion. I know you get a lot of requests, I,
yes.
I'm getting married. could you perform my, could you
Right.
perform at my wedding, or perform at the wedding, not perform, could you marry us?
Yeah.
Okay. Can
Yeah.
be the efficient? And I'm just saying, maybe start sneaking in. Yeah, great. Did you get a band yet? Did you get a band?
Right.
Maybe
This
I'll
could
send you a
be
demo.
like, that's right. This is like the Wedding Singer Sister Act mashup we've all been waiting for.
We've all that is a subreddit right now. That's gonna
That's right.
happen. So you obviously have a very unique position where you've been a preacher at past churches, previous churches. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously there are those individuals who you still keep in contact with, and you still have spiritual, conversations with. You're currently a preacher. How long have you been at Valrico now?
I've been here at Valrico 6 years and about 3 months or so.
6 years.
6 years and 4 months.
So I've known about you since before that. I think I can't remember if it was the first or second time Obama was up for election, and you had something going on, a campaign that you were running for president, and Kyle Jackson, he sent me this. You know how Kyle does. He's like, here's
right.
and then this and this. He sent me like your video, like two videos of campaigning, like that you had an entrance walk when you walked in, like they were clapping. Like that's what I remember.
Yeah.
It was like in a library or something. And then like he sent me a couple videos of your quartet.
Right.
So I've known about you since all the way back then. I voted for you. You were right in.
I appreciate that. I think I got about 11 votes back in 2008, which may not seem like much, but if you consider how much money I invested in my campaign, the money per vote ratio was extraordinary compared to the other campaigns. So I felt pretty proud about that.
You can now put on your LinkedIn or your resume, presidential candidate.
That's right. Yes, that is exactly right. Yeah.
Very cool.
I think that some of those ads that I made are still up on YouTube. If you look for Shane Scott for president or Shane for America, I think you can find some of them.
You should revive those and just dub over the audio when it says 2000 whatever, 2020. just dub right over.
I don't know if this would be an inappropriate use of your platform, Aaron, but maybe I should take this opportunity to announce.
Shane, why do you think I have you on?
Maybe I should take this time to announce my candidacy for 2020. I'm not going to officially launch until Labor Day. That's all the time I'll need to be able to wrap this thing up. But
right.
I feel like that there is a section of the electorate that's in the middle. Sometimes it's called the mushy middle, that does not feel represented. And I feel like who better to represent the mushy middle than someone who has a mushy middle.
Very good.
So I intend to announce, but I'm not going to do it officially and formally until 2020. But certainly, just by saying it here on your show with its vast viewership, will undoubtedly cause a groundswell of support. And who am I to deny the will of the people?
We just need to apologize to the internet right now for breaking
it. That's right.
Just broke completely. My goodness. That's great. So you have these previous individuals, previous friends, from past congregations, and now you have a whole congregation that you're working with as a spiritual leader before COVID. So right before, let's just say January, beginning of January, up until then. So what was your day-to-day? What would be your day-to-day?
Yeah. Well, in different churches, the preachers, have different responsibilities. In our situation, I'm very much what you might call a teacher, preacher. I don't have hardly any administrative responsibilities, for good reason, because I'm terribly disorganized. It would be a disaster. And I don't have like any, what you might call counseling responsibilities per se, although I'm certainly glad to meet with people, and I do it every now and then, but it's not like an every week thing. So my schedule is dominated by preparing for basically 4 teaching opportunities at our congregation. I usually preach once or twice, mostly twice on Sunday, Plus I teach an adult Bible study on Sunday and Wednesday. So a lot of my week really revolves around reading and preparing and then writing material for those classes. And then I usually would have, before this, one outside Bible study opportunity where maybe we have a family that's been visiting and they have some questions about Christianity. And so I would maybe go and meet with them and study with them. So my schedule was very much weighted around those kinds of teaching opportunities, and mostly were taking place at the building, not completely, but mostly taking place at the building. And in addition to that, as you know, as a dear member of our congregation, we had just moved into a new building, and part of what had precipitated that was we've had some growth. Really, there's been just a 25-year period of just steady growth, but we had a little bit of an increase lately. So part of what we were also working on was trying to figure out how do we integrate our newer members so that they really do feel like they are a part of the family. And part of what we were trying to accomplish is we had set up the second quarter of the year, April, May, and June, as a quarter in which we would specifically focus on drawing nearer as a church. And just in time for our focus on drawing nearer, we had to all stay at home. So that was then the big challenge that we've been presented.
Thanks a lot, Satan. So you have that. That's a huge responsibility. And one thing I have to mention, I always appreciate is, I've attended churches before where, and maybe it was just the time frame that I was there, but it was all out of the Bible, which, it's not bad. But what I appreciate is you bring outside references as well, some outside resources, where you'll talk about, you'll bring up different pieces of literature from whatever time period that we're studying within the Bible. Or you'll bring up how another religious text, might compare or contrast. And, you've also brought up, excerpts from books written by atheists. And I think that's extremely important. And it's to be able to still bridge that gap. I think it's the same concept of, being in that echo chamber, you have to be able to pull out.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Aaron. I mean, the Bible was written in a certain culture, and then now my job is to help it become applicable to a different culture. And the only way that you can put things in a culture is to look at their context. So part of my job is to help all of us understand the context in which the Bible was written. And so that's why, periodically I might refer to things from the time frame of Scripture. But then also we have to translate it to our culture. And to do that, that's why I draw upon my vast array of experience as a Star Wars fan, a professional wrestling fan, and the few other things, The Office, and a few other things that I bring up on a. I'm waiting for the members to create a Shane Scott preaching bingo card, and just have all of my regular topics and to mark them off. But in a way, it's no different than any business that may have started in another community, and then it's maybe going to open up a new branch in a different community. And in doing so, it has to understand, okay, what worked given the situation and the circumstances on the ground of community A? How is community B different? How is it the same? And what do we do to get that product into a new community that meets its needs? So in a way, like you were saying about leadership is leadership, contextualizing is contextualizing. And it doesn't matter if it's a product or if it's information that you're trying to communicate, or a spiritual service. You have those same challenges.
I use the concept of putting things into context. I use that example. I use that almost every workshop, every training, opportunity that I have, especially leadership development, because it's easy for us to stay within, to only judge with our biases. Right. To only that's easy. That's what I think on autopilot. That's what we do. right? We just
Right.
look at it the way that we are used to looking at it. From your classes and other classes at Valrico at the church, I've learned putting things, just that concept of putting the different Bible stories into context. I've learned that, and that has helped so much just in my conversations, because that's one thing I often say in, for instance, in a workshop, when it comes to emotional intelligence, or it comes to even conflict resolution. It's, a lot of times we're in conflict, or a lot of times, we often say, well, I can't believe that person did this, or what's wrong with that person? They're pointing the finger, and it's easy, especially when something might be even blatant, to us and others, like, that person is acting like this. What is wrong with them? And what I notice a lot of times as leaders, it stops right there. What is wrong with that person? ... Anyways, well, no, let's not have that question be rhetorical. Maybe
Right.
it should be a rhetorical. Maybe what is wrong with that person? What is wrong with the situation? What's going on? And actually dive into that. I think that's extremely important to find out. And that's exactly what I've learned from you at church is, okay, well, there are things in the Bible that may be confusing. No, that are confusing if you don't read it within the text or within the context. If you don't, do study, and a lot of times people say, well, oh, well, I guess that's it,
Right.
move on, rather than diving in and finding out a little bit more.
Right. Well, just like when you were talking a minute ago about conflict management, there is a context behind what someone says that may seem irrational to you. And rather than just say what is wrong with that person, trying to put what they have said in context is in part trying to see the world and feel the world from their point of view. Because one of the biggest mistakes we all make in communication is trying to respond in rational or logical terms to a viewpoint that is not really being rationally or logically presented. It's driven by a much deeper and more powerful emotional component. And when that happens, you cannot continue to talk in rational or logical terms. You have to stop and engage that emotional side of communication to try to feel why does this person feel the way that they feel. I remember one time, going back to my barbershop experience, a lot of us in barbershop experience the hobby as part of a chorus or a chapter. And one of the greatest leadership training experiences of my life was I was our chapter president for a couple of years. And we had in our chapter, we have a little board of directors, and we had an older member. I dearly love him. He just passed away, but dearly loved him. His name was Freeman Grote. Now, is that just not like an awesome name?
That is an awesome.
But
I imagine he's almost like a KFC Colonel Sanders type
yeah.
life. That's what I'm thinking.
So he was on our board, and he wanted to talk about. We had a chapter rules and regulations, which, I mean, that's the kind of thing that, from my personality, it's just like an ice pick to the eyeball to work on that kind of stuff. But he really wanted to talk about it one night. So I said, Freeman, we will set aside one board meeting night, and we will go through the rules and regulations and make sure everything's lined up. It really needed to be done. And he was prompted. All right, so we did that. So we got to a section where we were talking about if a member wants to donate money or leave money to the chapter, how can we determine how it will be used? And one of our treasurer was like he was one of those CPA guys that has every set of initials after his name. He did tax fraud investigation work. So, I mean, wow. He's got all these credentials. So he said to Freeman, all you need to do, any member who wants to leave money just needs to write, like on the memo, for this purpose, and that money can only be used for that purpose and won't just be swallowed up in the general fund. Freeman says, that's not good enough. And I'm thinking, Freeman, a tax expert, a fraud expert just told you
Right.
Why is it not good enough? And then it started this huge argument. And I'm just like sitting there watching all of this back and forth, wondering what in the world is going on. And then, I don't know why, but it clicked in my head. Freeman is an old man. He doesn't have any family. He's got a house. He's got stuff. And he loves this chapter. He's going to leave his estate to our chapter. And he wants to know, how is this money going to be used so he can feel comfortable? And like, I almost teared up, like my heart broke, because now I realized we're all arguing with him on a rational, logical level. That has nothing to do with this. This is an old man looking at the end of his life and thinking about the legacy he wants to leave. So we just kind of stopped, and I said, Freeman, I'll tell you what, you and our treasurer and I, we're going to get together and we will write something up, and we will make sure it is exactly what makes you feel comfortable about our process on this. And that's what we did. But that was like a great moment for me, first of all, to realize you can learn leadership lessons, like you say, that apply across platforms. But the other thing is,
that's a wonderful example, wonderful story of a leadership lesson.
Yeah. But the other thing was, it just really reinforced in my mind that when, like Stephen Covey talks about in the 7 Habits, seek to understand before you're understood, that the understanding has to go beyond the words on the page or the literal meaning. It has to go to the feeling and the emotional context. So that was the point. That's the emotional context that is so important as we try to deal with conflict.
In a workshop, a situation similar to that might come up, or it might be maybe a case study, or some activity that we have, and I'll always have someone will always say, yeah, well, isn't it the responsibility of the other person to, for instance, the gentleman leaving his money, it could easily say, well, wouldn't all of that been cleared up if he just came out with outright upfront about that? And what my response to that is always, well, maybe, but are we here solving for their issues, or are we here solving for yours? Are we looking to improve you or improve this other person? Because we can't improve this other person. They can work on themselves on their own, but you're always responsible for yourself. So are you going to wait for them to catch up, or are you going to, open your ears and are you going to evolve yourself? And so it's definitely has a take on that, that stands for yourself, looking to understand those other people. Can't wait.
That's exactly right. And the other thing about that, Aaron, is you have to be humble enough to say, all right, we're going to have this meeting, and I don't think we need to do it personally. Our tax expert just told us what to do. But am I going to get hung up on the process, or am I going to stay focused on the end product?
Right.
If your focus is on the end product, you don't care how you get there, so long as you get there, obviously in an ethical and legal way.
Right.
But your focus is on the end product. If you want to get meshed and mired in some debate over process, or there's plenty of opportunities to do that. But if by having a chance to meet with him, talk with him, understand him, feel what he feels, see the world through his eyes, we can get to a product that everyone agrees with, then the process is irrelevant. Why should I care what the process is, so long as I get there? And that's, it's one of the big difference between management and leadership. Management is all focused on process. Leadership is just focused on the destination, where you want to get to, and then you let others determine the process. That should be secondary. But so many times what happens is we get process fixated, and we lose sight of what the end result is supposed to be.
It's often said, many of the guests on Leadership Lockdown have mentioned that, the most important, the most critical, most important concept or trait of a leader, of a good leader, an effective leader, is empathy. But I think it needs to take the next step, which is the most important part of empathy is having humility. You cannot empathize with someone else if you're not able to have humility within yourself. I think so. You nailed it on the head. Having that humility is critical. So what were up until recently, what were like the biggest challenges that you would face?
Yeah, so the biggest challenges we would face in particular is, we have a lot of folks at Valrico who have been a part of the spiritual family for a very long time. And then we have a lot of people who have just become part of us within the last 2 years, really even within the last 6 months. And so sometimes it's hard to integrate new people into already well-established circles.
Right.
It's not really cliques because they're not like intentional. It's not like anybody saying, no, stay away, we do not want you. But
Right.
it's just natural that you're going to hang around people and talk with people that you've developed friendships with. So I think one of our biggest challenges was trying to have a real strong sense of cohesion. And then when the virus hit and we had to socially distance, then the biggest challenge came to be, how do we physically distance, but not socially or spiritually distance? That's become then the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. That's huge. And now since the virus broke out, everyone's, and I like that physical distance. I haven't, I've kind of heard it. Maybe I'm just hearing it. One of the last podcasts I said, often we don't need to be taught. We just need to be reminded, because you might say, oh, wow, I've never heard that before. You probably have. It's just the way I'm saying is resonating differently. Right. And what you just said, I don't know, just something there just clicked a little differently, is I wish we never called it social distancing. I wish we never called it social distancing, because look at what Zoom has. First of all, look at Zoom. Who'da thunk Zoom?
Yeah.
Right? With Skype, Hangouts, Google Hangouts. There's a long list of, and Zoom, Cisco, WebEx. Those are free products. Free. And Zoom exploded. Oh, if only to go back in time and invest a little. But look what Zoom is. I think as a people, so many people, even though they're physically distancing and social distancing, they're not socially distancing. They're social distancing. They're finding a way to continue to be social, because we need that, right? We need that type of interaction. Yeah, I wish they called it. I wish it was physical distancing. That would make a lot more sense. So what are now some of, or your day-to-day? Because obviously you're at home all day now, right? Just like vast majority of the United States, a large part of the United States, of the world, right? That's wild. That's mind-blowing. But so whereas you were preparing and giving the 4 sermons, but then also seeing people, and how's your day-to-day changed up?
Right. Well, the 2 biggest things that have changed are, I'm not obviously having the in-person Bible study opportunities that I had before, which I really miss, because there is no substitute for the dynamic of just being together. All right.
That physical presence, right?
Yes, exactly right. But having said that, I have had in the last month and a half, so many opportunities to do things like this, to do Bible studies with members, and also to do sort of like social media presentations that, almost, it's not an exaggeration, but almost 5 days a week, I've been doing something like that.
Wow.
So in addition to, I've still been doing, sermons and Bible classes for our congregation, which I'm sure you're really loving, Aaron.
I am. We are. I'll tell you, every Sunday morning, and I make my own communion bread every Sunday morning out of wheat flour and water and salt. I Googled original ancient Israelite, unleavened bread, recipe, and it is bland. It is wheat flour, water, salt, maybe salt.
Yeah. I have a communion set. I bought 500 of them for the congregation to use whenever the time came. But in the meantime, I've been using it at home, and it says that the wafer is exactly that recipe. I could swear it's styrofoam. I'm not really sure what it actually is, but anyway.
It's manna. It is manna. They found the recipe.
Oh boy, if that's what it is, then anyway. So, but in addition to doing things that I would sort of normally be doing for the church, I've been doing a lot of these kinds of things, and it's really amazing. I was talking with a friend of mine who preaches the other day, and it's almost, well, first of all, whether it's a church or a business or a school, you have to look at adversity as, okay, I wasn't expecting this, but what unexpected opportunities is this going to present me to do things that I would not have done otherwise, but really should have been doing, And so, that's just a general philosophy for dealing with adversity. But I was talking with a friend of mine who's also a preacher the other day, and we were just saying that I think that this whole experience has generated the realization that in our line of work, where we are, trying to communicate a message, we should have been making much better use of this technology and all of these platforms than we were before. And hopefully that is something that will not change. Another thing that I have noticed that's happened is, I was joking about how we were wanting to draw nearer as a church, but we thought the way to do that was going to be through our assemblies at the building. I think that there are certain respects in which we have become a closer congregation because of things like people FaceTiming me, checking in on me, that I don't normally routinely necessarily have conversations like that with. Or like somebody from a church where I used to preach who lives down here, she brought her children over to the house the other day, and they did chalk drawings in my driveway,
Oh, that's nice.
And I've had members do so many drive-bys. I had a drive-by the other day in which one of our families came by, and their little girl named Nora brought me a care package, which consisted of a Hershey bar, some candy corn, some Entenmann's mini cakes, $6 cash,
so great,
and 2 rolls of toilet paper,
right.
which I thought was the most accurate valuation of my preaching that I've ever seen in my life. That was it right there. And then
this is your worth.
and then her mom said, well, I think it was originally $7 and she took one out on the way to your house. So fair enough, hey, tough but fair. But
nice.
So my point is, I think a lot of our members have been doing things like that, quite honestly, that we weren't really doing before. So I think that, in many ways, this has provided us with opportunities to do things better than we thought we were going to. And I know that it's much different than a business in which there's a bottom line of numbers, and those are tanking right now. I understand that. I'm not trying to be flippant or unkind, because I know it is really tough for a lot of people. But it just so happens in the work that I do that this has actually been really a boom period for trying to do that kind of work.
That's great. I mean, I know some of your responsibility, or some of the things that it should be actually not just your responsibility, everyone's responsibility, but one thing that you focused on heavily was, going and talking with and sitting with individuals who are sick, or, or even critically ill, and just having, or someone who is, extremely depressed, or just someone going through something, that you'd have those conversations. And you're right, there's that physical element that's really important. Especially someone who may be lonely, one way to overcome that is physically be there. That's like a big first step. How are you handling that? Or do you see there's a huge disconnect, I'm sure, but what's your process with all that right now?
Yeah, no, Aaron, you really have touched upon the one issue that is just been very tough. There's no question about it. And even all the things that we have been doing, they are great in and of themselves, but we all understand they're no substitute. Like a restaurant that has gone, completely takeout, I mean, that's great, but it's no substitute for the feeling that happens when customers come in and it becomes their place, and they have all of the countless social and emotional connections that, really attach you to a restaurant. So we all recognize that. And definitely one of the areas where just literally by virtue of the medical situation, we do have a lot of people who are in desperate need of actual face-to-face contact that are not able to get it. And so I think it's good to acknowledge that, because we don't want to paint an unrealistically rosy picture of what the situation is. There is a definite downside to this for sure. And as those restrictions start to lift, then we are really going to have to redouble our efforts to try to sustain those kinds of connections. I mean, different people are wired differently. As you know, I lost my wife about 1.5 years ago, and at the start of this lockdown, I went through some really dark days of just, I had just started feeling like I was climbing out of the valley, and, was kind of regaining a sense of normalcy, and then whoop, right back down into the bottom, just missing my wife. But one of the things that has helped me to come out of that is just realizing it's important to acknowledge what I can't do right now, but it's also important to focus on what I can do to have connection with people right now, and to really keep a focus on that. And once I kind of made that shift, then when all of these different people would reach out to me in such sweet ways, it really helped me to appreciate and value it for what it was. And, different circumstances place different value on things, right? Inflation creates a different value for different goods and services, right? So maybe we're in a period of emotional inflation right now, where it just creates a different set of value for different kinds of emotional contact.
So I'm sure pre-COVID would get phone calls or just have conversations with people who have certain woes, certain sorrows. Have you seen like a big change in those sorrows, because of COVID, or have they changed? Are they still going the same?
Yeah. I have to say that from the folks in the congregation itself, I would have to say that if anything, maybe that has decreased slightly, with this caveat. I'm sure there's a lot of things that I don't know about.
Right.
I'm sure there's a lot of things that I'm not aware of. But I think I have sensed, and I could be way off about this, but I think I have actually sensed more of a spirit of, esprit de corps, like camaraderie, like we've all got to pull together in whatever way that we can right now, that has helped all of us to begin to think more outside of ourselves. And I'm not in any way saying, so therefore you should never feel depressed or anxious. I've
Right.
had those very dark moments. But what I would imagine will happen is, once we can start to resume contact, then there's going to be a lot of things which maybe in the heat of the moment, sort of the adrenaline of the moment, we've been able to all repress. I think there's probably going to be a lot of stuff that's going to bubble out. And you know what? That's okay. When
Right.
that happens, it'll be okay, and we'll bubble out together. That's probably not the most poetic way to put it, but
You hear that, everyone?
yeah.
When you need to go straight to Mr. Scott, go straight to
That's
Shane.
right.
So we mentioned you mentioned some of the things that have come up here because of COVID, like Zoom, some of the things that we're now taking advantage of. Do you see post COVID, or when? I don't think that post COVID is such a crazy idea right now, because we don't
Right.
even know what that is. But let's just say when we're getting back together, when we start seeing a little bit more normalcy, right? Do
Hmm.
you see anything in anything that would continue on or change, in the day-to-day practices? Like I know, for instance, I think, when we get back to church, I've heard, it's not going to be immediate cram next to each other, sit next to each other, maybe like a separation of row between or something like that. But
Right.
what other changes do you see taking place spiritually, if you would?
Well, I think first of all, this has made me realize there is much more of a demand, much more of a desire for online content than I realized there was.
Yep.
And well, I'll tell you something that kind of illustrates that. One of our younger members at our church, whose name is Jackson Sneed, contacted me. We stay in regular contact because he handles a lot of the logistics of putting the lessons online. So
Definitely.
we're
Shout
always,
out to Jackson Sneed. Shout out to him.
oh
He's great.
man, he's just been amazing. But anyway, he texted me and he said, I was thinking about putting together like, sometimes it's called a virtual choir, virtual chorus, where you get a few people and they each record their part to a song and then you edit together to make it like everybody sing together. And I thought, well, yeah, sure, why not? That sounds like fun. No big deal. So, but he was all over it, right? So he got about 16 of us, I guess, from our congregation, and we each recorded a part and he edited. And then late one night, he texted me, because we both tend to be up late, and he was texting me like an early rough cut. And I was like, wow, it sounds pretty good. And then he said, what do you think about posting this on our church social media? And I said, well, I don't know. And he goes, I think it could really drive traffic. And I thought to myself, well, like 200 people, right? Well, I said, sure, yeah, go ahead. Well, next thing I know, it's been engaged with like 80,000 times, right?
Oh, wow.
So it just shows you what I know, right?
Right.
But he's like a marketing business communication major. So he was aware of a possibility for a demand that I was oblivious to.
Right.
So I do think that one of the things that will happen is that we will definitely pursue trying to do much more regular online content because it obviously there is a real demand for it. I'm sure it'll probably decrease a little bit, as people get back to a more normal course of life. But I don't think it's going to decrease substantially. And I would imagine that there are a lot of businesses that have discovered the same thing. Certainly a lot of schools are, right? Because as you well know from your wife's work, I mean, there's a lot of schools now who are learning that there's a demand for this. I think a lot of colleges in particular are going to realize there's a demand for this. But I mean, certainly a lot of businesses have seen their online business explode. And maybe they've been slow to adjust to that aspect of delivery. And so I think that's going to be one of the good things that happens. I also think there's probably going to be some hesitancy for physical closeness for a while, and for good reason, But so there's going to be some things to navigate there. It's going to be really hard for me because, one of my primary love languages is mauling. So I'm going to have to really learn how to adjust to this new circumstance. But I think when people are committed to a common mission and they're guided by common values, they work this stuff out.
Very good. So I really do. I thank you for this time. And I think I thanked you in the very beginning, but if I didn't, maybe I'll edit in this part right here, just in the little clip back. No, but I do thank you for your time, because you do have a lot of responsibilities, and you do have, there are other people who you can be speaking with and helping them spiritually. And so I do thank you for this time. Usually what I have been doing, what I've realized is throughout my conversations on the podcast, any conversation, the whole thing, I draw and I milk out as much advice, as much, whatever I can from the other person. And then at the very end, I say, well, I know I've taken so much advice from you. You've offered so much advice. However, do you have any more advice? And what I usually get is like, okay. But what I also always get is, well, yeah. And then it's something that we haven't mentioned before. Sometimes it's something that no one has even mentioned on any of the podcasts. I'm like, all right, so I'm gonna do that with you now. So is there any other final advice or some advice that you could leave the viewers or the listeners?
Sure. My late wife was somebody who had business experience in retail management for many, many years, and she hated all of the cliche business buzzwords. Because in the cultural environment of her corporation, they were just platitudes. They were never taken seriously. But I really do think in these times, it should be clear to everybody that you have to have a strong sense of what your mission is, whether it's a church or a business or a school, because having a sense of mission gives you a compass that helps to navigate when the storm comes and it starts to knock you off course. So, we have a particular mission about drawing people to faith and drawing people closer together. And so we're not able to do it the way we always have, but we know what we're supposed to be doing. So now we just have to figure out a new how. So I think having a really strong sense of mission is crucial. quite honestly, everyone has a mission. If you just don't, if you don't think you have one, then your mission is to just flail away and be aimless. And you're probably doing a really good job of it. You know, you're right on mission, but you're not really accomplishing anything. But I think the businesses that are going to do best right now are going to be the businesses that have such a strong sense of what our mission is, that they're finding ways to adapt to still try to accomplish that mission. That's certainly what we've been trying to do.
Absolutely. And that goes for business, that goes for personal, that goes all the way through.
Exactly.
I think that is a perfect spot to end off, because unless you have some better advice than that, no, keep going.
Only worse. Much worse.
Awesome. Shane, again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's certainly my pleasure, Aaron. I love you and your family a great deal. And just quite honestly, just glad to get to hang out and chat with you. This is probably the most one-on-one time we've had ever. So
right,
exactly. I think it's great.
Yeah, we have a lot of small snippets, a lot of like little jokes that we can do. A lot of jokes.
Drive by.
Yeah, I appreciate this. I really do. Thank you so much, Shane.
Yeah, thank you.
See you guys.